me off quite like the narrative of debt is a sin when 80% of debt in the United States is medical debt. Hi friends, welcome back to the Avocado Toast Budget. If you're new here, my name is Lexa, and today I want to talk about the moral neutrality of debt. If you've been here for a while, or probably not even that much time, you probably have heard me say debt is morally neutral. I say this a lot, and I think that it is like one of the pillars to the ATB, but I get a lot of questions about what does that mean? How do we start breaking that down? How does that work? But I was taught to feel so much shame and guilt around my debt, so how am I supposed to navigate this? And all of those are like totally valid questions, so I just kind of want to like hang out and talk about this whole concept. First off, if no one has told you before, debt is morally neutral and you are not a better or worse person depending on if you have debt or how fast you're able to pay it off, or even if you are prioritizing paying it off. The reality of it is that we are living in a capitalist society where you have to be able to afford to survive. You have to pay for basic things like food, clothing, shelter, and if you're in the US, medical expenses, which, like I already mentioned, makes up 80% of the debt in the US. But even if your debt is not because of any of those things, we'll talk more about that, it doesn't matter. But I do want to make it very known that in a system where you can go into debt just trying to survive, there can be no moral attachment to debt. Many of us are just trying to do the best that we can with the resources and the tools that we've been given. A lot of times in the US, personal finance is not taught. If it is taught in school, it's usually not quality personal finance education, so we get thrown into adulthood having no idea how to manage credit cards or a budget or anything. We don't know how to invest, nothing, and we're somehow just like supposed to know. And then we start to feel so much shame and guilt when clearly we didn't know, and then something happens, we end up overspending or cycling into credit card debt, and we feel like it is a moral failure on our part. Even though we hadn't been given those tools in the first place, and to be perfectly honest here, as we all know, money is a very taboo topic. No one likes to talk about it, especially if they're struggling with it. So oftentimes we don't look for the help that we would need because there's such a stigma around even admitting that you need help, which, if you're asking me, I think is very much planned, right? I think some very rich, powerful men figured out that they could get even more rich and powerful if they halted personal finance education and access to those resources and started building systems in place that made you feel shame and guilt around being in debt or struggling with money, so that then you didn't go and look for that education on your own and you just continued in that cycle of poverty and debt so that they could then capitalize off of you and your labor. Because let's all be honest here, it is much easier to keep people placated and not rioting and not asking for more money or doing research into the unethical practices of companies whenever they are exhausted and overworked and stressed from their finances. So no, I don't think that any of this is an accident. I think it is a very well played system that has a goal in mind to make a few men richer off the backs of everyone else. And it's why I'm so passionate about deconstructing this idea that you have a moral obligation to be debt-free or to rush toward debt freedom or to put as much money as you possibly can toward any debt that you have. Because this narrative of debt being a bad thing, something that you should feel shameful about and hide and not reach out and talk to people about because, God forbid, they know like the skeletons in your closet, in your financial closet, is not the same narrative that is shared with the rich and wealthy. The rich and wealthy leverage debt all of the time, and it's considered a good thing. They will take on debt to make them more money, to grow businesses. They'll take on low interest debt and invest money instead because debt is not seen as a bad thing. It's seen as a tool. Yet when the lower and middle class get into debt, it's seen as something that they should hide, something they should rush out of. Obviously, it's a bad thing. And again, I would say that that is on purpose, right? Because if we start taking advantage of that, then that might impact their bottom line. And the people at the top do not want that happening. So they will fight to make sure that you feel so guilty about your debt while they are like sitting on hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in debt and raking it in because of that. So if you had a moral imperative to be debt-free, that same moral imperative would lie on the backs of the rich people as well. And clearly in our society, it does not. So It's all bullshit. And I had mentioned earlier that even if you got into debt, not because of technically like survival, or you didn't spend it on groceries, or you didn't spend it on finding a place to live, that doesn't make it any worse. It doesn't mean that you should feel any more shame around it. When I got into $20,000 of credit card debt, it wasn't because I couldn't afford to make ends meet. A lot of my credit card debt had to do with mental health. I was struggling so much with anxiety and depression, and also, didn't know it at the time, undiagnosed ADHD, which caused me to impulse spend out my fucking ass, and also made it so I could like barely function. So I'm sorry, when I could barely get up and take a shower and brush my teeth every day, no, I was not spending money to go to the grocery store, spend an hour grocery shopping, come home, put those groceries away, and then cook myself dinner and have to worry about the fact that I would then have to clean up after that. No. I was just ordering $25 worth of food on DoorDash so that I could eat something that day. That impulse spending was not a reflection of my character. It was a reflection of me being overworked, of the expectations of being a grad student and working full-time, plus a lot of mental health struggles that were all playing in this as well. But I hid my debt for so long, and I didn't access the education that I needed in order to get out. I didn't ask people for help that could have helped me and would have gladly helped me, because I thought that that debt that I was accumulating was a reflection of my character. I thought that if I started telling people about my debt, that suddenly this like perfect image that I had put on would just be like shut down, and everyone would be like, oh, see, I knew she was a fucking fraud. She's got all this shit going on. I couldn't imagine. And would think so ill of me. When in reality, when I did start talking about my debt and how much I was struggling with saving and impulse spending, I didn't get this reaction of, wow, you should feel so guilty. I got the reaction of, oh my God, I feel so much shame and guilt too. Here's all of my financial shit. Let me tell you, you are not alone. There is not a single person that I talk to like one-on-one about this that has ever been like, can't relate. Sucks to be you. Most like average people also are struggling with this because we all grew up in the same system that is rigged against us. And because we are usually all just realizing that no one else is talking about it, and then those messages, whether they are like actually said or just implied, we pick up on and we realize, okay, no one's talking about this, but I know it exists, so this must be something that I should hide, so I will do my best to hide it. And then that cycle just keeps repeating where we all feel so lonely, but we're all going through very similar situations. So again, just another reason that I say debt is morally neutral. I am not a better person now that I've paid off my credit card debt than I was when I was in the depths of my credit card debt. I now have more education on the topic. I'm medicated. I know that I can ask people for help and lean on people. I've set up systems that work for me even when my mental health isn't doing so great and I can't spend as much time on my finances as I normally would. That help me to continue to stay out of debt and to save money. But none of that is a reflection on my character. I'm worth the same inherently now than I was back then. I just have better tools, resources, and education under my belt now. And guess what? I still make mistakes. I just talked about like my worst financial fuck ups in one of these videos I'll link up here, but a lot of them were pretty recent. Like I just completely didn't realize I had a charge on my credit card a few months ago and my credit score dropped like over 60 points, almost 70 points overnight. That didn't make me a bad person. It didn't mean that like I wasn't worthy of running the ATB or being called a personal finance expert. Just meant that I am human who was going through a lot of things and mistakes happen. But I also know that I was like feeling those initial feelings of shame and guilt, and if I was really tied up in that, I probably wouldn't have talked about it and probably would have continued to like avoid that situation rather than like facing it head on and finding a way to get back. So now my credit score has almost gotten back up there. It still has a little bit of a way to go, but that was because I was able to let go of like connecting my worth to that mistake, see it for what it is, change some things, figure out a plan to move forward and move on. So I really hope that you know, no matter why you got into debt, how much debt that you're in, how out of control you feel with your finances, that is not a reflection of your character. It's not a reflection of your inherent worth, and you still deserve to feel confident with money. I have tons of resources on here, including a video that I did talking about how to unpack that shame and guilt around our finances. I'll link that up here. But I really hope that you enjoyed this video, and hopefully, if nothing else, just feel like that you can breathe out a little bit and remove a little bit of that weight off of your shoulders, and give yourself permission to forgive your past self and forgive your future self for any mistakes that you have or will make. Again, we are all just doing the best that we can. If you did enjoy this video or you learned something cool, please remember to give it a big thumbs up. It really helps out the YouTube algorithm, helps boost this video to the top. That way more people can find this content. And I will see you all next time. Bye.